So if you take a peek behind my camera, I guess, you'll see there's a bunch of images here on Twitter that are new things that are coming to Back 4 Blood, which is kind of crazy that there's already so many different new things that have been announced, considering it feels like the other update with the legendary cards just happened. So let's start covering some of these so we can keep up with it, all right? So first big thing here is the skin that I never knew I needed, but now that I've seen it, I can't imagine my world without it, is this Biker Doc skin, which is absolutely incredible. This one's going to be coming here. I don't know if it has a name for it. Fuel Injected Doc. Doc has some of the best skins in the whole game, like time and time again. And then another big one here, this one's been rumored for a while, is the Flamethrower. Expels a cone of fire and it is refueled by gas cans and propane tanks. And then in DLC 3, there's going to be a few different ways that you can acquire yourself a flamethrower. So these aren't going to be a one-note thing. You'll see them in a couple of different places, and they're a lot of fun, if I do say so myself. And then let's keep moving up here on some of the new things. I have no idea how you pronounce this skin. I believe I would call this the LARPing skin for Hoffman here. And it fits Hoffman's personality in every way, shape, and form. It kind of reminds me of like if Hoffman tried to be Link or something from Zelda, except this is just kind of what happened. But now let's get to the meat of some of what's going on in here, some of the real game changers. I mean, we talked about the flamethrower, that's a big game changer, right? But these are going to be the ones that affect your strategy. These are going to be new cards. Now, I can give you a little bit of insight on some of these, or really just maybe ideas on what you could do with these that are going through my head. I haven't worked directly on all, or really any of these cards. I did on a couple of these ones up here, but let's start talking about what we have here and what I can imagine they'd be really good for, okay? So we have Phosphorus tipped here, and it says continuous gunfire gives an escalating chance to set targets on fire, which, let me give you some ideas here with fire here. If you don't already know, tall boys are vulnerable to fire. I think they take like, I don't know, like 5 times the amount of damage. Don't quote me on that. I think it's about 5 times. They take a lot more damage from fire than pretty much anything else in the game. Specifically tall boys. Not like crushers. Like literally the tall boy. And then bruisers take a little bit more. It's like 3 times more, I think. Ugh. But then crushers and rippers, they don't really care that much about fire. But this is a really strong card against them. And it also, I mean, imagine it's fire damage, right? This is also kind of good to create somewhat of like a, almost like a ticking damage, kind of a bleed type of effect on your commons too, right? Now, in terms of continuous gunfire, I am not sure. Perhaps a shotgun's pretty good for it, because the way shotguns work in this game is they throw a bunch of pellets out. So I don't know if it's a duration thing or if it's just the amount of time something has been hit. But if it's the amount of time something has been hit, then I can imagine a shotgun being really good for this. And then on the topic of fire here, we have Cleansing Fire, and this is honestly one of the coolest looking cards ever. Freaking look at this. Charisse is just like, ugh. So gain a stacking 5% damage resistance every second you're on fire, for a maximum of 5 stacks lasting for 15 seconds. Removes most negative status effects, plus 40% fire resistance. So there's a lot going on here, right? So damage resistance is just going to be a flat out damage resistance from everything. But then we also have the fire resistance there, right? So if you can get yourself, I don't know, like 25%, wow, 25% damage resistance just from this card sitting in some fire on top of the fire resistance, you're pretty close to really not taking that much fire damage. On top of the fact that you can have like a hazard suit, or you could have, didn't durable recently get fire resistance? So you can be pretty close to being immune to fire, or you could just pick yourself up a damnation and just have that going on for yourself. And removes most negative status effects. Now, there's going to be some testing and stuff as to really what that all means. I can tell you for sure that it'll remove stuff like festering. I'm pretty sure it removes some of the other things that come along with, like, if a wretch pukes on you or if a stinger spits at you. But again, don't quote me on those things. I'm really curious to see all the different things that end up with this card that people can go ahead and synergize to remove some nasty effects or really make it so they can push through areas that might have been a little bit tougher before. And then speaking of pushing through areas, now that I take a look at this here, Drone Spotter. Begin marking nearby mutations every 7 seconds. Gain 20% chance to negate damage while active. So that's basically like a dodge chance, right? 20% chance to like, oop, didn't hit me. And then the marking nearby mutations, I could see this being kind of nice if you hear the prompt for a stinger. And then you're like, where is it? Because those things, stingers are so cheap. They just like walk around. Like, you want to know where they are before they know where you are, right? So I think this could be really interesting from that perspective, especially if it has a really wide range, right? So Drone Spotter is going to be one of those. It's a fragile card too, right? But I guess it kind of matches with the whole idea that you're supposed to be taking less damage because 1, you're receiving more intel. 2, if something does go wrong, you have a chance to dodge it. It's going to be another one of those gadget cards that eats up your quick slot. Okay? And then finally here we have Hazmat Specialist. And this one provides 35% acid resistance, and your bait jars do direct damage to targets and can hit weak spots. And then the team effect is that killing specials that are covered with bait creates another bait jar. Now, something that I think might confuse people a little bit based off of what I was hearing rumblings of is that it says killing specials. Specials are mutations to these cards are already updated. Like some of the things like that say things like specials, that's already been fixed. So some of the descriptions here are a little like not super current because they've already been addressed when we see things like, oh, it says specials. Well, it's not supposed to say specials. That stuff's been fixed. And like another big one is if you take a look here, there's like not a period on Wasteland Chef. Like this whole thing is a little bit rewritten too. So keep that in mind. It'll make more sense when it's actually out. So this card I think is super interesting, and I have a feeling it's going to trivialize some levels, especially the holdout levels. So Hazmat Specialist, like it says, if you go ahead and you throw a bait jar at something and it's under the effects of the bait jar and you kill it while it's under the effects of the bait jar, you guarantee yourself another bait jar. So not only do you have this self-sustaining pile of bait jars that never run out if you're smart with them, you have the chance to get perhaps multiple bait jars if you hit 2 mutations at the same time, and then they both die while they're in the effects of the bait jar. Also, since it goes ahead and is affected by, or not affected by weak spots, but it can affect weak spot stuff, it might benefit from some weak spot cards. So take a look at anything that says weak spot, either things that benefit from when you kill something's weak spot or something that just does weak spot damage. And then finally, I think the thing that really makes this card strong is the fact that it controls crowds. Crowd control wins games in any genre. If there's something that can dictate where something runs, or if it's stunned, or anything along the lines of crowd control, like slows, whatever, what have you. Very powerful. This is going to be one of those cards because it will manipulate where the common run to. And then, while you have this free time to go ahead and not be getting thrashed by common, you can go ahead and just shoot stuff and kill it and then get more bait jars. So I think Hazmat Specialist is going to be really nice for a lot of different scenarios. I wouldn't be surprised if it's good on a melee build. Like, there's all sorts of different things where you could, like, really dictate what's going on in front of you. And, of course, Hoffman would be really good for it, too, because he's got the whole pockets thing going on, and he can make more bait jars. Or imagine this with something like Highwayman. Is that the card where you can make either a bait jar or a Molotov? Hazmat Specialist is cool. And then also the 35% acid resistance. Don't sleep on that, because if you have scar tissue, then suddenly you're, like, 85%, so acid just doesn't matter anymore. Which, let me tell you, some of these wretches, they really dish out damage, so that'll be a really nice boon for that card as well. And then let's move on to the next set of cards here, which includes Wasteland Chef, Sonic Disruptor, Ether Bomb, and then Empowered Assault. So with Wasteland Chef here, you have the ability to prepare a gourmet meal. If you go ahead and you melee food items, you have a chance to either create a gourmet dinner or a mediocre meal. And if you are using a combat knife, it increases your chance of a gourmet dinner. So what you're hearing here is there's going to be 2 different food items, and that you can convert food items that are already there to go ahead and make these new food items. I don't want to talk too much about it because I want you guys to like figure it out, have the surprise, all that type of stuff. But I think when we were really trying to figure out what we wanted these things to do, we wanted it to be an interesting decision when you are deciding to do something to food items. And I really do think that Wasteland Chef has the potential and the power to be a very strong card once you get it rolling on all cylinders. So curious to see what you guys think of Wasteland Chef. It's a lot of fun. Something to clarify is that the gourmet dinner and the mediocre meal, they're not going to be bad things. Like if you get a mediocre meal, it's not going to be something that gives you negative status effects. These are not going to become mean things if you convert a food item. Okay? So on to the next card here, Sonic Disruptor. Emit a pulse that deals heavy stumble damage to nearby enemies and has a chance to knock off armor. Now, this is an offensive slot, which means that this thing's on a cooldown of like 1 second. This offensive slot gadget cards are like 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. So imagine that, right? Every second you can dish out heavy stumble damage. And then in terms of what does heavy stumble damage mean? That's one of the things I saw people talking about a lot. It's like, I don't know what that means. What does heavy mean? This is made to be a short range card that really dishes out stumble damage. I think it's tuned to make it so that you can stumble a bruiser on no hope. but you got to be close range to it, right? That way people aren't just like running through the map and then just stumbling everything. Kind of like the expired T5 problem, right? So this is a very strong card, but it has a particular use that will save your team, but you're not just going to run through the whole level with it, okay? So, have fun with Sonic Disruptor. I think it's a very powerful card, and I think that kind of justifies the 75 ammo cost because it's kind of a, again, crowd control wins games, right? And this is kind of a get out of jail free card. It lets you hit something and then reposition really quickly, and it's on every second, so you can keep doing it. Ether Bomb here. Emit gas that attracts Ridden to you for 7 seconds, but also slows your movement speed by 50%. So, initially when I think of this, again, crowd control. This is like a taunt, right? So to me, this means it's going to be something that's useful for when you're trying to pull everything towards you, maybe off your teammates, or really just to clear out an area. Because something that I think is a little underestimated sometimes in this game is chip damage. Like one little common punch gets in there, and those add up. They really do. They trickle out your economy. They make you take trauma damage. There's all sorts of stuff that chip damage really messes with you. Ether Bomb, I think, is going to be similar to the idea of like something I do a lot when I play this game is I'll run forward a little bit and I'll shoot kind of all around and I'll make a lot of noise and then I'll backtrack just to kind of manipulate where things are coming in from and clearing an area. I think this is going to kind of do that, especially for like a melee user, right? It really depends on how big the range is, and really something that could be useful is, let's say your teammates are behind you and then you're the melee person and they're getting attacked. If you want to pull those things off of them to help your teammates, I think that's where Ether Bomb's going to be really interesting. And then finally, for Empowered Assault. After you kill a mutation, your next shot on a mutation is guaranteed to cause them to stumble. And then we also have 5% team stumble damage. Now, something to clarify here, this is one of those things where the text has already been updated, but this is not correct, is your next shot is not how it is. It's going to be the next time you deal damage, okay? So this is not exclusive to guns. The next time you deal damage, okay? So, what I imagine with this card, where I can see situations where it's really strong, is it's a team effect, right? And that's to kind of like nudge you into the idea that this could be something that's really good for your team. Honestly, 20% team stumble damage, I think that's the part that people think is really good about this. I think it's fine. The part I think is really good is if you have all 4 people running it, that means that you are guaranteed to have a stumble on every single mutation if your team is all running it, right? Because somebody is going to get the last hit, which means they're the ones that get the buff. And then if everybody's team firing onto the next target, the next target, the next target, everything's going to be stumbled over and over and over again, which is really strong IMO. Something that's personally cool for me with Empowered Assault is that when I was applying to Turtle Rock, this is one of the cards that was on my application. Back when I applied to Turtle Rock, I had to make a few things. I had to make a character and give them abilities and stuff like that. I had to make 5 cards, and I had to make a corruption card. And maybe something else, but it was those things that I had to like write up a paper for my application. It was like a 15-page document, right? This one was one of them. I initially called it Chain Reaction. On that note, I think Emergency Transfusion was like kind of a part of what I had built into my character that I applied with there too. His name was Oswald. And Oswald was like kind of a necromancer dude. He had all sorts of things, but one of the things was that he could like sacrifice himself in order to help out the team. And then Emergency Transfusion kind of like is that, right? Which is kind of cool. And then what we have next is nothing. But let me tell you, there's a lot going on in this next DLC update. This is scratching the surface of the things that are coming. So stay tuned, stay excited, because I can imagine this Twitter is going to have a lot of different things to go ahead and be covering over the coming weeks here. So hope you guys are excited. Hope you learned a little bit more. Hopefully I gave you guys some stuff to chew on here while more updates keep coming out. And then thank you guys for hanging out. I appreciate y'all, and then I'll see you in the next video that we do around here.